Hi, everybody. I'm so honored, privileged to have Alok Sama, sir, with me in another episode of I Read This Book. With this, I'm like extremely proud to say that best authors of India in the non-fiction space. I'm very proud to have all of them with sir. He has written a terrific book called The Money Trap, which is essentially uh, not really a business book. It's a memoir and a very good one. It's perhaps one of the best non-fiction books that I've read it in a long time. And Alok Sir is a finance veteran. He started his journey with Morgan Stanley and then went on to work with Softbank directly with Masayoshi San, who happens to be a legend for the uninitiated in the finance world. He's just next level. And Alok Sir, and so is Alok Sir. So sorry, sir, for that lame introduction, but I did my best.
Thank you. That's a lovely introduction. Thank you, Nishant.
So the first question is the cover page has a reference, Lost Illusions.
Yeah,
Is that the Balzac reference?
it is indeed. You're. It's good of you to pick that up. Not many people get that. It is.
You really? So why did you pick this up? I mean, Lost Illusions is a very sad story.
It is. It is a sad story, but it is. There's some elements of that story I relate to, which is if you're familiar with the book, and it's a wonderful book.
It's extraordinary.
And he's just an extraordinary writer too. And some of his writing is actually fun and mischievous if you read Balzac, his short stories in particular. But at the heart of the story is this young Frenchman who comes from rural France and then goes to Paris and gets caught up, in this case, in the world of journalism and sees the corruption, the hedonism, the wealth, and messes with his head, and then goes through a lot, has a bit of a comeuppance, and then comes back to his roots. And some elements of that story I related to because
So the Chardon character, the main.
yeah, exactly. And I came from India, and it was there are very different geographically, obviously, but you think the world was not nearly as connected. Certainly wasn't flat when I left India. When I left Delhi to go to the US, this was in 1984, and it was more than a cultural shock, much the way this young Frenchman might have experienced when he was thrown into this world of money and power and so on and so forth. That went to my head too, and so the elements of that, and then my own journey through that really appealed to me. It's a wonderful book too, made into two decent movies. I wouldn't say great.
Have you watched the 2021 French movie or the adaptation for?
I have. Now that it stops at kind of halfway, maybe 3/4 the way through, but it is a good movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
But the central character of the book.
By the way, I love that you picked that up because I had a battle with my publisher, and their view was nobody's going to get it. The literary reference. I mean, I said it means something to me, and I want to convey something that is a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more philosophical, literary in that title. So,
a serious conflict in that movie was about the ethical compromises of Chardon. If I'm pronouncing it right,
yes,
it's Chardon,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, but that's a lot of what I was getting at. That's a lot of what I saw.
But your story didn't have any of those ethical compromises.
Well, I'd like to think I didn't make any ethical compromises. Though I'll be the first one to admit that the culture of money, greed, etc., went to my head. I was very complicit. But a lot of what I saw involved ethical compromises. At the extreme, there's this strange smear campaign, which is what the book starts off with.
Medias res.
People do in the thirst for power and money. People do some seriously strange shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you were in that spot. It was just it made a good story. At the end of the day, your life made a good story.
Exactly.
That's what I think. Everything leads to a good story. When I was just. It's a digression, but people often try to find the meaning of life and everything. And I think at the end of the day, all you leave is a story. And
that's really well said. A lot of people kind of ask me the question, which I really don't like, about kind of what messages were you trying to
Yeah, yeah,
convey,
yeah.
or what's, and I was like, look, I mean, I'm just in as honest a way as I can. I'm just trying to tell you my story. You decide what you want to take
You
away
didn't
from it.
want to be preachy, and you weren't.
Absolutely right.
This
Absolutely.
was very good that you didn't try. In fact, it was very self-deprecating at many instances where you were actually calling yourself a non-player character, and you admit. I'll come to that, sir. But it was the thing is the character. He the way he ends and the way he essentially the water. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, he actually commits essentially the signature forgery with in the book where he tries to
Yeah. No. Again, I mean, nothing I did went that far.
yeah
but
yeah. It was basically, but I love that because it's one of the very very beautiful gems, and it's very old also. I mean, a lot of
very
people might
It's
not.
very old. It's very
And
old.
then
I read a lot of very old books. I take the view, statistically, something that has withstood the test of time, as in like 100 years, the odds of that being a great book are way higher than a book that happened to be on the bestseller chart for, I don't know, Asian Age or Sunday Times in London or whatever last week.
yeah, this is Lindy's effect, right? What's lasted will last.
Exactly.
What's new is gonna fade away. And that was Lost Illusions, a beautiful reference.
Well, not everything that's new will fade away, but all I'm saying is
Yeah.
statistically,
Statistically,
the
yeah.
odds that something that has been acknowledged is great for like over 100 years
Yeah.
is probably likely to make a greater impact, more worthwhile investment of time.
Absolutely. That's probably why a 600-year-old play is still getting remade.
Well,
Like Hamlet, everybody.
there's Shakespeare, of course,
Yeah,
is a league
Shakespeare.
by himself. Yeah.
Yeah. Sir, and not just that, I mean, the index, when I look at it, that's the first thing I got, by the way. When I'm looking at a book, I read the index.
That's interesting. Okay.
And I read the index and I was like, Born to Run. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Music, I took a pill in Ibiza.
Yeah.
Again. Airport Test. Strawberry Fields Forever.
Yeah, there you go.
Beatles,
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
City of Gins, William Dalrymple.
Great book.
How?
His best book.
You like William Dalrymple?
I loved City of Gins.
Uh-huh.
Look, he's a terrific historian.
Yeah.
But City of Gins, I'm as a writer, I mean, I admire writing craft. That was just a great, brilliantly written book. And now, maybe I'm from Delhi, so it made more of an impact on me. I think that's his best, far and away his best work.
And any other book that you like from him?
They're all good. I've read. I mean, I have to say, this is heretical because his latest book has just been so huge. But to me, there are elements of it that felt a little bit like a middle school history lesson. It was like a lot of the stuff I knew, and kind of it's not the type of book I gravitate towards. I tend to gravitate much more towards fiction. And the beauty of City of Gins was it had a memoirish feel to it. I mean,
Those
this
are the
element-
best books.
Those are the best. I mean, this is
All good writing
this
is
my city.
autobiographical.
This is my city,
Yeah.
my home, seen through the eyes of a foreigner and a terrific writer, and showing me things that I simply didn't know, or even things I knew, seen through a different light. That was just very, very cool.
And come show me the money. Jerry
You start
Maguire.
talking about the chapters. Yeah,
Jerry
exactly.
Maguire. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And that's quite a shift when you're talking about Balzac 1890 and then Show Me the Money, Cameron Crowe. It's quite an amazing. And that sort of rings true. This aggression will not stand, man. Dude. All the dude
Lebowski, absolutely.
references, they were just all over the place, far out, man.
By the way, there were two versions of this book. Not the book per se, but before every chapter, one version, I had as an epigraph a line from Lebowski. And then another version, I had a line from a Dylan song.
Okay.
Not unrelated, relevant to the content. But then I was persuaded that, look, I mean,
It could have been pushing it too far.
Yeah, exactly. And it just ends up, I remember Hari Kunzru telling me this. So look, it just ends up, it's great, I get it. But for most people, it's just going to be like, you and Bob having a dialogue that nobody else is a part of.
Yeah, I get it. And how much land does a man need?
that's
Again,
Tolstoy,
a beautiful book. I mean, story. It's just
Yeah.
like very very
Hard-hitting, yeah,
intense.
yeah.
Have you? There's a movie on the similar theme, All the Money in the World. Christopher Plummer. Have you?
I've not seen it. No.
It's a beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
So this was just intenser. I mean, the kind. Usually writers try to hide their references because then people say that, hey, you were too, you were too inspired, or you're too, let's say, you've all the influences show very, but you were like,
Honestly, the book is a memoir. It's an honest memoir, and it just reflects how I think. So my mind is hopelessly cluttered with musical references. I say in the book, and I meet people, I tend to associate songs with them, etc. Now, please don't ask me what song I associate with, but because that'll go off on a tangent. But it just that's just how I think, and I think in terms of books and in terms of situations or Dylan songs or Shakespeare quotes, or most often music song references.
that's
But maybe it's overdone. I mean, a lot of people very legitimately have criticized my book as overdone with references, and but it is what it is. I mean, that's just me.
I don't think, I mean, I wouldn't say it's overdone with references, but if I can humbly say a critical aspect from a critical aspect, I'd say it could be complicated for a new reader
Yes, I understand. I completely understand.
because it's the kind of language that you'll use, like Tantalusian, hamster wheel, and, Hector's ankle, and all the very, very deep references.
Yeah.
So they might
I
just
know what
be,
you mean. Yeah. You have to
Moors
it's-
Andalusian instead of the Bigfoot of Italy. Who's gonna understand that?
yeah, no, it is. It's. There is one of my favorite writers made an impact on my writing. Some of which comes through is Nabokov, and he had this line that you never read a book, you only reread it, and I'm a real believer in that. So it's not a legitimate expectation for people to reread my book.
Nabokov is
but
from Lolita.
that is his most famous. That is his best known book,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
controversial content.
loved it. I
But
loved it,
in
absolutely.
terms of prose, quality of prose,
Yeah.
it may well be the greatest book ever written. I'm a
You
huge fan.
do feel like that? Okay. Nice. Sir, you actually, you took a course for this. You went and did an MFA, like Masters in Fine Arts.
So I didn't take a course for this.
Not for this, but you did.
I wanted to write, and I wasn't arrogant enough to assume that I had nothing to learn. So I actually decided to immerse myself 2 years, full-time graduate degree with a thesis requirement. This is not like a, kind of get on a video or any kind. I mean, this is like, in a classroom with a bunch of 20-somethings and all the drudgery of schoolwork and assignments and grades and all of that stuff. And I'm really, really glad I did it. I didn't know what I was going to write. And as one does in an academic environment, I experimented. And as I experimented, as part of the program, I was in writing workshops, and some of what I wrote when I talked about my experiences resonated with a lot of the other students and the professors, and they kind of urged me to write a little bit about, kind of with a writerly eye for observation about some of the things I'd seen and done, and that was sort of the genesis of this book.
But sir, a very big critic, and I believe that. I actually believe that. Like when we are doing creative stuff, structure is actually an enemy sometimes.
Yeah.
And a course, a proper, like a classroom type of a program might take individuality away, because then you get a proper curriculum kind of fed into you.
No, so I think in general you're absolutely right, but I think the people who run the program completely get it. It's all, I mean, all of the people teaching in the program are, without exception, are phenomenal novelists. I mean, it includes Jonathan Safran Foer, Hari Kunzru, Joyce Carol Oates. They're phenomenal writers. Lee Newman, David Lipsky, who's written made a documentary about it. His experiences, his journey alongside David Foster Wallace. So these guys get it. So there was nothing in the program that was prescriptive to the degree we had craft classes. It was you read different writers and you pick and choose what appeals to you, and you try and understand the different techniques, different voices people use, different techniques they use, how they introduce characters, and you adopt whatever appeals to you, right? I mean, that's the gist of what goes on in those programs, and you're exposed to so many different styles of writing, different genres, and very importantly, voices and how people approach their craft, and that's just very, very cool.
But what
Writing workshops, you're just writing, and you're critiquing other people's work, and that actually makes you a much better critique of your own work.
But what do you think about the fact or the perception or the opinion that Beatles never read music, or Elvis didn't know how to read music? No, like a lot of these who people we aspire to be like,
Yeah.
they were very raw. Does it take rawness away? Does it take your voice away?
No, nothing I experienced in the program took my voice away. I've been told I have a strong voice. I've started to write fiction now, and there's only one person who's been allowed to read so far what I've written, and her reaction was, "This is very much your voice." Now, so I've been told, for better or worse, a stronger voice than most writers. It's quite distinctive, maybe opinionated, but I don't think the voice has gone away. And nobody tried to change my voice.
What about the rawness?
Nobody interferes with the rawness as well. The editors, well, to be fair, I mean, I think it in some ways it prepares you for what you need to deal with when you start to publish. You will have to deal with editors. And I had some struggles in terms of what I said and their views on, kind of, this is a little bit of the New York wokeness in terms of things that were appropriate to say and things they had a pretty strong view that should not be said, and I had to deal with that. So, it is what it is.
So, when you talked about authors, which authors have like specifically inspired you? When you
Oh
were
man, I mean,
or books.
I mean, there's so much in my book which will give you a sense of people who've inspired me. I would say I would gravitate towards, in terms of favorite writers, pro stylists would be people like Zadie Smith, Martin Amis,
Okay.
Amor Towles, who's a great writer.
Gentlemen in Moscow.
Gentleman in Moscow, terrific book.
Good book.
In
Great
terms
book.
of pro stylists, I like people who write like that. David Foster Wallace is another one. Kind of with David Foster Wallace, kind of that voice.
I've
is just
unfortunately not read anything by him.
worth
What's the
reading.
book, sir?
Infinite Jest is his biggest book,
Infinite
but read
Jest,
some of his essays as well. They're
Okay.
just brilliantly written.
Okay.
It's the kind of voice is Zadie Smith, David Foster Wallace, Martin Amis, whatever they write, no matter the subject, fiction, non-fiction, I'll want to read because I just know I'll enjoy their voice.
No non-fiction author?
Very few, to be quite honest. I mean, I'm just I guess people like Michael Lewis, etc. They're good writers, but for me,
Michael Lewis, I
I put-
respect Michael Lewis a
I
lot.
respect him too. I think he's phenomenal.
Flash Boys.
Yeah, but for me, fiction is, and that's a little bit of what I tried to do with my book too. Is just write it like a work of fiction.
Yeah. Good.
That's how I approached it.
That's how it should be. I mean, if you're writing a very good story, it should have suspension. Even the good fiction.
People like to read stories,
Yeah.
and there's so much that you and I talked about this before we started. Because it's there is so much out there that competes for attention that you've got to write compelling stories to get people's attention. So many of these tomes, nonfiction tomes that get written, I would wager the Hararis of the world, no disrespect, he's one of the brilliant thinkers of our time. So many of
I
those
actually
books are
disagree with
bought.
that.
So many of those books are bought and just lie on a bookshelf.
Yeah. And
Which bit do you disagree with? About
that
the
he's a great thinker.
Yeah, good.
I
Okay.
don't think so.
Okay. Well, I was trying to be nice, but
You are very polite, sir. Even in your book, you're very polite. Even though you have a controversial opinion, which I'll talk about.
okay.
But it's just very, very polite. And, what I was saying was, I just almost lost my train of thought, was that good fiction needs to be believable.
Yes.
Like there needs to be suspension of disbelief if it's good fiction. And good non-fiction needs to feel like fiction. because there has to
I
be.
think that's right. I think that's well said.
Yeah.
The only thing I would disagree on is, I mean, with fiction, there's magic realism where you suspend reality, and
Even that,
writers do that. I'm personally not a huge fan of those types of writers, but
Gabriel Garcia Marquez types.
yes, now he is.
But you quote Murakami a lot.
I'm a fan of Murakami, Marquez. I mean, I think for me at least, 100, Love in the Time of Colorado, rank even ahead of 100 Years of Solitude. I mean, he's brilliant writer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good
brilliant
books.
writers.
Two. I've only read two of him, but yeah.
But you're picking someone who's like at the ultimate apex of that genre.
Far
of
end of the
writing,
spectrum.
right?
Yes. Perfect. And sir, I mean, you read. I used to run a campaign called 52 books a year.
Yeah.
Where I used to try and read a book a week, and I did that
Wonderful.
I did that for 11 years, 2012 to 2022.
Yeah.
And I couldn't read 52 in any of those years, but I averaged 40.
Yeah.
But by the time, by the end of this journey, I found out that nobody really reads books. Clearly, I mean, honestly, I can put it delicately, but nobody really reads books, sir. I mean, people who pretend to read actually don't read.
Yeah.
They buy books because they look pretty, but they don't read it. Read them. And, even the book sales in Kindle has dismal completion rate, 6%. So,
is that right?
Yeah.
I actually did not appreciate that. Is it only 6%?
Yes, sir. I mean, it is what it is.
I did not know that. That is sad.
Yeah, I mean, it is sad, and they have different ways of painting the numbers. That this is some of these books.
Now, Kindle versus physical books not reading, that makes me wonder, because people will buy books. I've seen libraries and I won't name them, but public figures sometimes, rich and powerful people who have libraries stocked with books that look good on a bookshelf, but I know they haven't read.
They haven't read.
And they've actually been curated so they match with the personality of the individual.
Exactly.
People actually do that.
And they also do it
but with
music.
Kindle, I wonder, because with Kindle, what's the
people
point?
buy Kindle and they just buy. I mean, people
They
want to
get
feel
bored with
good.
it? Okay.
People want to feel good about. Everybody wants to invest in good things, right?
Yeah.
But it's no. So how does it make you feel as a writer? I mean, you're writing a book, and it's on. It's people are buying it. Sir, by the way, this is a fake copy of your book.
Are you serious?
Yeah, sir. I mean, I gifted your book twice to people, and then I bought it from a roadside seller.
Oh, that's a little scary. This is a little scary.
It's a compliment. It's the greatest compliment you'll get, sir.
I don't know, man.
No, sir. I mean, just think about it. People are actually starting to pirate your books.
I don't know how I feel about that. Okay. Well, wow. Okay. This is a little scary. It's a good copy.
It's a good copy.
Because in India, I mean, there's no paperback that's been marketed in India, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So this is a pirated version.
Yeah.
Man.
Don't
this
you
is
feel
scary.
good? Or do you feel good or bad?
I feel terrible.
Why? Why is that so?
Well, this is theft. Now, look, I mean, I have the luxury of, I won't say I don't care about the money I make as a result of these books selling or my book selling, because everything's going to charity in my case, to a renovation of Writers House at NYU. But they're stealing. They're stealing money. They're stealing money from a writer. In my case, they're stealing money from a charity. And that makes me feel
Sad.
Yeah, makes me angry.
What about folks like William Dalrymple who say like there's nothing wrong with it? They're just trying to make money,
It's theft. I don't know
It's
where he's
theft.
coming from. I'm shocked he said that.
It's like
I
people-
don't. This is not kind of. It's just theft. There's no other way to describe it.
When you
You're
walk
stealing
around
money.
this, if you walk to the streets of Delhi, you'll see like 15 books on somebody's shoulder.
No, I hear you, man. I grew up in Delhi, remember?
Yeah,
So I've
yeah.
seen those like people.
And
selling
now
books.
it's your book. It's there now.
Okay.
But
Wow, I
you know,
learned something. Yeah.
it means like so this is when you know that the book is actually.
I hope you got a proper copy and you paid for it. No?
I
Oh, good.
bought 2 copies. I
Oh, good
gifted
for you.
them, and then
Good for you.
I visit these
But I'm
books.
glad you showed this to me. I did not know
Yeah,
that.
I
That is
brought this
scary.
book
That is scary.
specifically to show you.
Wow, that's a little scary.
But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, as musicians, sir, I mean, I make music.
Yeah.
I've invested so much of money into music, time,
yeah,
effort,
Yeah,
10,000 hours plus easily.
yeah,
And music sells for free.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so we've been through this battle, and we've lost.
But hold on, music doesn't sell for free. That's
It does.
harsh. There's
No.
been battles fought, streaming. I mean, artists still get paid.
Nothing, sir.
Taylor
We get-
Swift is fought on
No,
behalf
sir.
of recording artists, etc. I mean,
We get paid in peanuts. Not the peanuts we get paid in. They're not even enough to feed the chickens.
yeah.
Right? It's
Well,
just,
for what it's worth for writers. Now, again, I have the luxury of, I'm at a stage in life where I'm not doing this for money.
touch wood.
But I have lived with, I've been part of a community of writers, young writers, aspiring writers, and I know how tough it's going to be for them. I know how tough it is for them right now to make ends meet.
I don't
And
know how
think
they'll
the
make
shift is
ends meet.
seamless.
I
It's
don't know.
tough.
I don't
It's
know.
tough.
I
It's,
don't know.
well, they wait tables. I mean, they'll get jobs full time, part time, and they write on the side. It's tough. And the notion of people stealing outright is that makes my blood boil. That makes me angry.
I'm so sorry. But
No. That's just. I'm not. I mean, it's not your fault, man. I mean, it's. And I'm shocked that writers like Willie Dalrymple would defend it. There's just no excuse.
Okay.
I mean, a thief needs to feed his family, fine, but that's not a defense. That's a nonsensical defense.
Yeah, that's not a defense, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even Chetan Bhagat, by the way, he was like, "Are you serious? This book is on? Okay, I've arrived."
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, man. Okay.
You've been interested in the world of art quite a lot. Music, films, books, as a finance guy. And so cliches are cliches for a reason. That
Yeah.
finance people are very boring. They lead lives which are very lackadaisical, very focused towards money, and I'm so sorry, sir.
I've been
Black
there.
and white.
No, you're
and,
right. But look, I mean, I'm just late. So let me, my one quibble with what you said is it's a stereotype, and it's an accurate stereotype, and I've run into plenty of those. But just keep in mind, which is why I just want to tell the story of my own experience, which is, and I use this line in the book, which is, no kid ever grows up.
As far as
dreaming-
I can remember, I always wanted to be a banker.
Great line.
Said nobody.
Said nobody I ever met. Exactly right. Exactly right. Right. So nobody's like that. I mean, it's just something for me I stumbled on, and I happened to be an avid reader. I mean, actually, being in this neighborhood is sort of nostalgic for me because, my father, when I was, age 10, was a lecturer at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, very modest salary. He was actually teaching, right? Not barely even practicing. Couldn't afford my book habit. I was a keen reader. He took me to Bari Sons in Khan Market, right? Still there.
Which is now
Now
an
it's become a
iconic
chain.
place.
Yeah, it's an iconic, but it's a chain of bookstores now all over Delhi. It was a solo bookstore at the time. He took me there. He knew the old Mr. Bari, who sadly now, like my father, has passed away. And Mr. Bari talked to me, and God bless him. It's one of the kindest things anyone ever did for me. Is he let me borrow 2 books a week? I just had to return them
Wow.
new.
Wow. Beautiful.
And so I used to read. I might have toyed with the idea of, I don't think I ever even thought about writing as a profession. It was just something I was interested in. But, it is, people might dream of being writers or being musicians or being, a Tendulkar or a Kohli or whatever. I mean, those are the things kids dream of. Nobody thinks about being a banker. Something you do to make ends meet, and then you end up getting caught up in it, which I was.
Yeah. So my question is like, amidst the people in your brethren, so to speak,
Yeah.
with artless lives
Yeah.
and a very busy life,
Yes.
busy and artless,
Yeah.
and then you're a family man. How did you sustain your passion and love for these things?
My passion suffered. I mean, look, 2-part answer. With respect to reading, my reading suffered. There were huge gaps when I was busy reading prospectuses. You just didn't have time to read. The arts, now I have my wife to thank for. I mean, she was very deeply immersed in the arts. She's a musician. She worked at.
She is? What does she play?
Pianist, and she sings too.
Okay.
And in our days working when we were living in New York, she worked at the New York Philharmonic. And a little bit of her influence, I guess. My daughter's in the visual arts. She works at Sotheby's in contemporary art. My son is inspired by Jerry Maguire. He's an agent. He's a celebrity agent. And he's very into, cinema, etc. And, when he went to college, I think that's film studies may well have been his preferred choice as a major, but he ended up had a thesis requirement, so he ended up majoring in economics. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd end up I'd give my wife a lot of that credit.
Okay. So that's a good answer. I mean, that's speaking of finance and career, so you often state that your life has been a series of fortunate accidents.
Mostly fortunate.
I loved it. I actually like that. It's intellectual humility and it's general humility. I mean, considering the places where you've been.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah, and I meant that in the context of kind of advice for people in early years is so much of life is just plain serendipity. I mean, so much. Literally, I could take you through it. I tell the story of how I ended up at Softbank, and you know exactly what I mean. That I took a pill in Ibiza chapter. That is literally how it happened. My going to the US was a result of that one meeting with Dr. Shiv Gupta at St. Stephen's College, which I described. I did not get into this, but even my job at Morgan Stanley was a function of one of the only Indian managing directors at Morgan Stanley taking a liking for me. And these are all accidents. Now, I have to say, they must have seen something meaningful that kind of professionally they weren't doing me favors, but these were all accidents.
Absolutely. So there's a Woody Allen quote. It says, "The man who said I'd rather be lucky than good saw deeply into life. People are often afraid to admit how much of life is not in their control."
Very well said. I'm a Woody Allen fan. I had never heard of that, but I completely agree with it.
Match point.
Yeah.
Do you agree with
Completely.
I'd rather be lucky than good?
Totally agree with that. Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah.
That's beautiful because
That's Napoleon talking about his generals too, right? Rather have lucky generals than it's.
Oh
it's
yeah, he
absolutely
did. I
true.
didn't get that
Yeah,
reference.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that's beautiful because a lot of people, try to optimize. So I am invited as an entrepreneur to speak at colleges and schools to give some, and I say like everybody's optimizing for effort.
Yeah.
Might like to optimize for luck. I mean, how do we be more lucky? And I'm glad that you sort of that's validation.
Yeah. Now you can get, you don't want to be a sort of a nihilist, right?
Of course.
Like things happen.
Yeah. No, but you make efforts. And
absolutely. You got to keep your head down, but so much of it is don't get stressed out. Is the point, I guess, if things aren't going because it's things happen over time.
So I went to Vipassana and for the second time in 5 years, and it says na rag na dvesh anitya hai. No craving, no aversion, impermanent. It's impermanent. So very good fellow. So you say, and this is the controversial part, or let's say X-rated, everyone is a chutia unless proven otherwise. That's what you wrote in the book.
I did not say that. My friend Nikesh, I'm quoting my friend.
But you believe that, right? Everyone is a chutia unless proven otherwise.
It is, it's not advice I would give anyone, but a lot of people, it's actually funny you raised that. I had young man come up to me in Delhi. He wanted to come to a book signing. Then he finally met with me at another event. And he told me that line made a big impact on him because he said, that's exactly how I think. And I tried to tell him that, look, I mean, this is not necessarily good advice. I consider that it's a little bit arrogant on my part. But I mean, as particularly in my younger days, I used to feel that way. But that is not a positive quality.
Sir, I mean, I think it's, this was essentially a question that do you not believe that this is good advice in general, professionally and personally? Because there's so many of
it's a little bit too cynical.
and how does it serve people who follow it?
Yeah, so, it is, it's probably not a bad thing when you're in the world of finance
because there's so much of BS, sir.
Yes, there is a lot of BS. And I do make that point in the book, which is this is not me making judgments about people being stupid or being poor or it's not about money or class or any of that, right? It's much more about chutias in the sense of trying to pretend, right? And I think it's with that it's appropriate to be cynical.
Yeah,
I think being in the world of banking, being in the world of money, did make me cynical.
And so even
still does, by the way.
I'm sure, sir. And in fact, when comes back to the question of the books, right? When
Yeah.
you see people who have bookshelves neatly organized and you know that they haven't read
They
it.
haven't read, yeah.
That's pretense, that's masquerade,
Yes,
and you
absolutely.
see it that
Yeah.
it's not.
Absolutely.
And even in the VC world, sir, I'm again no
Yeah,
aspersions
yeah,
on you,
yeah,
but you see that a lot of people in very good positions,
Yeah.
they are, I don't know what they think. I mean, what they do, and they just clearly expose themselves.
Yeah, I
Or
do. Look, I mean, I hate to put Elon Musk in that category, but he's the ultimate. He's a man that, I used to kind of worship, put on a pedestal. He's a man who's changed the world. Right? I mean, climate control, if you accept that it's one of our biggest problems, he's done more than anyone out there, more than Al Gore, right? They
of course, any day of the week.
gave Al Gore a Nobel Prize for making a documentary. So, it's that maybe that's too cynical, but you know what I mean, right? But now, bit of a God complex. Elon,
But-
I mean.
But still won't call him a chutia.
I wouldn't dare call him a chutia. No.
So speaking of chutias, and how do you differentiate between speculation and information in this day and age? Because you see people, good degrees, great
Yeah.
degrees,
Yeah.
your colleagues and your people, I mean your classmates probably
Yeah.
pedigreed from, and then you see information coming out from corners which are fringe, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like RFK out of nowhere telling people that, the vaccine thing was a scam, and he turning out to be right at the end of the day. What do you think? How do you differentiate?
Okay, I
between-
don't want to kind of dive too into RFK. I
Okay.
think RFK with hindsight, he had a point about the COVID vaccine.
Yeah.
But I think he's a little bit over the top on his views on vaccines in general, in
Okay.
terms of the eradication of disease at large. Right.
Okay.
So, it is. I think that position is controversial. But
Controversial, definitely.
to
And
say
the
the
jury
least.
is out, so we'll see what happens to the 72 vaccines which are mandated to be. But point is, that's information,
Yeah.
and that's speculation.
Yeah.
And the mainstream like 2008, Michael Burry, sir,
Yeah.
was a speculator,
Yes.
essentially, right?
Yes.
But he was the actual source of information.
Well,
Because
yes and no. I mean, he's a speculator. I won't call him a speculator. He
Yeah.
had a well-informed, thoroughly researched view on
which was very contrarian.
on the pricing of securities. And I mean, you make a lot of money when you're contrarian, right? You're never going to make a ton of money. You can for a while, but not for any length of time. You're not going to make a lot of money by just riding with the herd.
So how do you differentiate between, because he was against like rating agencies, the banks, the government, that was
Well,
speculating.
he wasn't against them. I mean, he
shot
just
it against them.
thought. I mean, Hank Paulson's another example. I don't know how stupid I was, man. I sat through a presentation by Hank Paulson, and he was so persuasive, and I should have invested in his fund, and I didn't, because there was just an element of, how can this guy be so right and everyone else, the rating agencies,
Yeah, yeah.
etc., be so wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
That does not happen, to be fair, very often, but it does happen at the edge in extremes in market bubbles.
And it happens regularly. And then the entire world proves itself to be chutia.
Yeah, they do, but here's the problem, and I'll give you a great example. One I referred to in my book, Julian Robertson,
Okay.
one of the greatest investors of all
Great
time.
story. Beautiful
One
story.
of the greatest investors of all time. And this goes back to your point, which is the man calls a bubble, but he calls it too early.
Just a bit early,
Well,
actually.
a year or so early, and within that year and a half, he's on the wrong side of the markets, loses a ton of money,
Loses his
investors
shirt,
desert it,
essentially.
loses his credibility, destroys so much wealth, and then he shuts down the fund almost exactly when the markets completely crater, right?
Yeah.
And this is the problem. I mean, it's just extraordinarily tough to get markets right in that sense. Bubbles, I've been in enough, and I think I can spot bubbles, and maybe we're approaching one now. I just can't predict when it's going to turn.
So you don't have a framework to weed out Shrutyapa or find out where it's going?
No, I have a decent nose for it, I think. But again, I mean, unless you can actually predict when it's going to turn, what's the point?
No, the point is like when you talk to Indian VCs and they're sounding out, they're changing their Twitter bios to .eth and they're talking about NFTs and they're hyping them up and Then you're like, man, these guys are out of their asses.
Well, look, I mean, I blogged about this in 2021. I mean, right at the height of Dogecoin and GameStop. I mean, that was just ridiculous. And I'm seeing that now with, meme coins, for example. I mean, that's just
the
nuts.
NFT market blew up, everything blew up, and then these guys, like, they still have those jobs. Who gets anyway?
Yeah.
So there's you can only have a nose for these things essentially. I don't think there's a way to even at your.
Well, I mean, it's just illogical. When things don't defy gravity, when they're logical, they're logical. It's just not, it is. Crypto NFTs were a case in point. I mean, those numbers were just,
So
bored
then why
apes or whatever.
don't people smell it? I mean, when you talk about companies, even in India, ShareChat was valued at $5 billion.
Yeah.
When Facebook India was valued at $5 billion.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, that's just,
like,
it's herd instinct. I mean, it's FOMO, and that's how bubbles get built.
So, and then the best, most pedigreed, most educated people, most well off, most well positioned people make them. So, are we just like, it is what it is?
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, look, I mean, I give this example in the book. The guy who literally wrote the book on bubbles.
Charles Mackey, Extraordinary Popular Delusions,
There you
Madness
go.
of
Exactly,
Crowds.
right? I mean, best known book on market bubbles, talking about tulips and all of that good stuff. And he did not spot the biggest bubble in his own lifetime, which was railways.
Yeah.
Railroads.
Yeah. It's just very strange. I mean, I have a lot of respect for people like Sanjeev Bichandani sir, though.
Yeah. Disciplined, low-key, doing his thing.
Never following the trends.
Yeah.
Like, he never invested in companies who were off the flavor, like the season.
Yeah.
Which is the thesis of all the VC firms. Like, this is, right now it's AI, so everybody's going to bet on AI.
Yeah.
Just 2 years ago, it was NFT crypto. Everybody was going to bet on NFT crypto, and so on and so on. D2C and everything.
Yeah.
House of Brands, they followed Thrasio and everything blew up. It's just funny. But Sanjeev Bichandani sir, and very few people.
Yeah.
Do you think, sir, it has a lot to do with actual experience of building things that brings that kind of nose for bullshit detector?
I mean, no. I think, look, I mean, Warren Buffett's great that way, right? I mean, he's not, you've never seen Warren kind of bet on, tech trends or whatever's fashionable, etc. I mean, his mantra is, you see him build up cash right now, which I think we could all learn from. He's just got a monument. I think the number is
365 billion.
Yeah, 300 plus billion. I mean, it's a monumental numbers. And we ought to learn from that. I mean, he kind of clearly sees a lot of froth, a lot of excess in the markets, and he's building up a huge war chest. I mean, I think the comment has been made to me, particularly for value investors, that investing is really about, like, it's a really, really boring business. You lie low for long periods of time. And when there's blood on the streets, that's when you move in.
Yeah. I personally, when I was thinking about this whole, when you wrote that, everybody's chutia unless proven otherwise, I thought.
I wasn't necessarily talking about investing there. I mean, I was talking about.
But it applies.
People's behavior. But it does.
Unfortunately, it applies
Yeah.
to VC investing, to startups, to
It actually, now that you think about it, I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but it certainly applies to it. And I do say this explicitly. I'm not, again, coming back to Warren Buffett, you talk to Warren Buffett, he will tell you, he'll be the first one to tell you, I have not outperformed the index, and you are better off investing in ETFs. Invest in the S&P. You'd be better off relative to investing in Berkshire Hathaway.
But is that true?
Yes.
It is?
Absolutely. If you look at last 10 years and then you go back 1 year and you look at the previous 10 years and then you go back to the previous year and you look back 10 years, you will find that he has underperformed the market.
But CAGR 22% against 11%.
But he has underperformed the market. He has underperformed the market. Go back and that analysis has been done, by the way.
I read
He's
Snowball.
just too big, and he knows it's just very, very difficult to outperform the market when you have that quantum of capital that you become the market.
Essentially. What do you think about people like Ray Dalio, though?
What about Ray Dalio?
Like, always, ahead of the curve. And
Is he?
Is he not?
There is the only manager I'm aware of who has made money for investors in absolute and relative terms, outperforming, is James Simon.
Okay.
Literally, you talk to people in the business and they will agree with that. I mean, you look at Chase Coleman, I talk about Tiger Global. Yeah, you can look at IRRs, but IRRs don't tell the full story.
Okay.
Because, and I'd make this point in my book, it's a mathematical point.
That
but
was a
you'll get this.
beautifully explained thing, the $1 million home example, right? That's what you're talking about?
Well, I was more making the point that
talking about Masa says that SoftBank has 44% return instead of Berkshire Hathaway's, and then you say that the bonds were denominated.
That's it. So that's more about leverage. No, the point I was making is and Tiger Global is a great example. I mean, you're when you crash, you typically, in this case, you crashed or they crashed at a time when the corpus of capital they were managing
was that max.
was max. So the absolute dollars that they destroyed dwarfs the 20-30% IRR, the amount of capital that they actually made for investors, the amount of money they made for investors. That is just wiped out.
That's Nassim Taleb's work, life's work, the black swan, the tail risk, so to speak. But Ray Dalio has navigated the markets.
Is he? I mean, I look. I mean, he's a pretty unique animal, but I haven't seen anything evidentiary that would suggest that he's consistently overperformed the markets. But I don't know what's the relevant index for Ray Dalio. It's just such a Bridgewater is such a complex animal.
It's a very complex. I just finished reading his book, The Changing World Order.
Yeah.
The new book that is very beautiful. Sir, I don't want to talk about Masa too much because you must be bored of talking about him. You know, all the interviewers.
He's a fascinating character, but you're right. I've talked enough about him in many other situations.
My question to you is very specific. It's like when you're in the shadow. Again, please don't take it otherwise. I might just be slipping with my words, but I mean well. When you're in shadow of such a giant, like a titan of the industry, like a total visionary, right? You must be having to curb your enthusiasm and curb your opinions, curb your intellectual sort of thoughts just because the boss says something else. And which
no, not really. Well, I'm not trying to curb my enthusiasm. I'm trying to curb his enthusiasm, which is more my job because my role or the role for someone like me is to be analytical, to be disciplined, but I always had, I think, enough humility to realize that he had qualities that I simply don't have. And as a technologist, you cannot rely on numbers and analytics because if you go back at the biggest bets he's made, the numbers did not back up those bets, but he was right. For his biggest bets, I know there's things he didn't get right, and we can talk about WeWork. Well, we shouldn't talk about WeWork because enough's been said about that. So he hasn't got everything right. Nobody does. But the big ones, he's got spectacularly right. And none of those big ones were backed up by analytics.
That is true, sir. But my question was, as a professional, like, I have an interest. Everybody has an interest to speak their mind, but you can't speak your mind. You have to shut up and suck it up.
No, you don't. No. Masa's not like that. I mean, to me, it is. Nobody's perfect, but sure, Son has his flaws, and he talks about his flaws. But not listening to people or not giving them a chance to speak, quite the opposite. He wants to hear opinions, but he is the decision maker. Every mistake he's made, and I love this about Masayoshi Son, he has never pointed the finger at anyone else.
Of course.
I mean, look, one of the things I hated in the world of investment banking, ultimate chutia behavior, if you want to call it that, is CEOs who, once something nasty happens, big trading losses, they look for a scapegoat. I'm looking for a head. Right? With Son, you never have that. With WeWork, he made the point out of his way, acknowledge that people in his team had told him not to do this deal, and basically comes out and says, I blame myself more than I blame Adam Newman.
Of course.
Mea culpa. And it takes a lot of self-confidence and courage to do that.
But sir, in your book, you recall that episode where he called you when Ritesh Agrawal was sitting in a hotel.
Yeah.
Yes, and he said $500 million.
Yeah.
And, he gets the voting rights.
Not his best decision.
No, but you said, Masa, should we just take it to the team?
Yeah.
I said no.
Yeah. And then he gave a reason. And his reason was and that's actually a really, really good example. His reason was that this guy, young Ritesh, reminds him of
Me.
Masa, reminds me of me when I was his age. And he was backing the entrepreneur. Now, you may say, okay, he overdid it. But again, that sense of seeing something special about an entrepreneur is what led him to back Jack Ma. There was nothing on paper that someone
I
like
saw it
me,
in his eyes.
yeah,
That's what he
that
said.
shining. From someone like me, there's no analytics I could have done that would have justified backing a Jack Ma. I mean, it wasn't as if Jack was planning on creating the Amazon account. That wasn't his business plan.
Of course. No, but as a professional, like if most people, sir, who probably lack intellectual humility or probably lack some sort of awareness of the dynamics of the situation would have said, Masa, this is not, they would have insisted that no, the team should have taken a look at it. And probably that's why they don't rise. So
Well,
it does
look, I mean, there is a hierarchy. You can't insist on anything. At the end of the day, he's the boss. You can't insist on anything. Look, I mean, I'm an employee, right? I mean, I work for a company, and within companies, there is a hierarchy. There's some things you never compromise on, ethics, for one. And I didn't. But in terms of expressing opinions, you express opinions. But you're working for someone who has an acute appreciation for, look, the buck stops with me.
Yeah.
And I get you. I understand where you're coming from. I give examples when I talk about, for example, Ola, right? About my misgivings. And he gently explains to me where he thought my logic was flawed or what I was missing. His vision of the world and how it might evolve, and he makes the decisions.
So how I mean, would you give this advice to young entrepreneurs or let's say professionals to sort of be very delicate with your because some people for better or worse,
Yeah.
in many cases for better,
Yeah.
they speak out and sort of lead to great outcomes for themselves and companies.
Well, you always need to speak out. If you're in a place that does not allow you to speak out, then you're in the wrong place. Absolutely, right? I mean, that is not going to be a successful organization. And someone like Masayoshi San is not as successful as he is because he does not allow people to speak up. Now, he makes his own decisions, and that's critical. But he's also one of a kind. Right? I mean, he is a classic founder. He's a visionary.
Very beautiful picture of him, actually. You drew a very brotherly kind of a, picture of.
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I mean, I did look up to him as sort of an older brother.
Yeah. And it was very. And how does it make you feel as an intellectual? I mean, when you continuously in many parts of the book, you were like, am I the non-player character in this simulation? Or, should I be here? And there was like one point where he's like, Masa called me and I thought he would ask me for analysis of WeWork. It's just Latash. And how does working with such a giant lead to your own perception of your intellect? Is my question.
No, I mean, call it arrogance. I mean, I've never doubted my analytical abilities or my intellect. But is part of what comes with age, I guess. You have a acute appreciation of what you have and what you don't have. And he had this intangible quality, this ability, uncanny ability to spot technology mega trends, to see things around corners. That, like, for me was wow. The other thing he had, which I really, really respected, is call it idealism, this thing about using technology to change the world, which I thought was very, very cool. Right? I mean, if you come from Wall Street and this culture of kind of being
flipping
an agent
things
and, picking up the crumbs and kind of milking every deal for every penny you can. He was above all that.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very cool too.
Refreshing change.
If I didn't have that respect, and by the way, it wasn't as if he might have asked me to order a bottle of wine, but it wasn't like he was ever even remotely disrespectful.
No disrespect.
He was amazing.
In fact, he is
with
the
me.
embodiment of respect.
Yes.
Because he treats people with the Japanese sort of ethics.
Absolutely,
Very, very
absolutely.
nice.
Polite to a fault. I mean,
Very,
he was very
exactly.
classy that way. Still
Yeah,
is.
very Japanese,
Yes.
even though he's Korean.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
uh, when you look at people like Nikesh Arora, sir,
Yeah.
does it, now that you've like taken a backseat from the world of investing majorly? I mean, you're still, I guess, advising a
Yeah,
few
yeah.
venture capital firms,
Mhm.
right? But you're not. That's not your primary deal now.
Mhm.
Do you get tempted to get back in the game because he's your closest friend and
Who, Nikesh?
Nikesh, sir?
Well, no, Nikesh is. I mean, set aside Nikesh. I mean, I moved on. I think I'm living, from my perspective, my best life.
Uh-huh.
So I'm doing what I enjoy doing. I have no urge to move back. None whatsoever.
None whatsoever.
No.
It's like the actual end of the book ends with how much land does a man need. You actually feel like it's enough.
It's more than just. I mean, because I was at that point a while ago. It's not just a matter of making, having enough money. It's much more a matter of like, kind of stages of life, which I talk about in the book, which is
Vanprasth.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I'm doing hopefully a little bit more giving back, a little bit more kind of priority, family, friends, and doing what I really like. And at some point, yeah, maybe it's sannyas. But the cool thing about writing is you can hopefully keep doing it for as long as you want.
What do you think about people like Michael Bloomberg and Donald Trump who are like 78, 76 and still, kicking it? Even Warren Buffett, sir, for that example. Like,
Yeah, I would put all of them in the same bracket, and I don't want this to turn into a political decision.
no, nothing to do with politics, but the
Michael Bloomberg's a wonderful entrepreneur. What he's
Legend,
done is
absolute legend.
unbelievable. I think we all know that.
Yeah.
What he did as mayor of New York was great too.
Uh-huh.
I think it's unfortunate that his presidential campaign never really got off the ground. But
no, sir, my point was like these people are still want to do this work, whatever they are doing,
yeah.
at age 76, 78.
To each his own. I mean,
each his own.
look, I mean, there's some people for whom there is no such thing as too much power and too much money. And I'm not going to point fingers at anyone, but that's what drives them. And they keep going forever.
And when you take an exit sort of from this world of hyperactivity, which is investing and so on,
Yeah.
there are no withdrawal symptoms to get like take part in a deal or something, or to advise somebody very closely and to mentor.
Been there, done that.
No, but now that
No,
because
I
you're
mean,
in pink
I
of health,
said,
touch wood.
Like I said, I mean, been there, done that. And yeah, I mean, health is much more important. And, kind of, it is. No, look, I mean, it's not as if I'm doing nothing. I think that would be the case if I was just simply sitting on the sidelines.
No.
But I'm doing something different, which I personally find, candidly, way more fulfilling than anything I've ever done. I mean, discussions like this, for example, I mean, I've had a chance. The greatest kind of payback from writing this book, forget about money. It's writing books is a pathetic way to make money, but it's the outreach from people who've read, listened to what I have to say, who kind of get what I'm trying to say, and reached out and talked about how it moved them and how it caused them to. Some actually re-examine their lives, at a minimum, re-examine how they think about, as simple as calling their mother more often.
But aren't people always trying to pull you like some? I'm sure people are still like, Alok Sir, I have something to pitch you.
Too many of those, sadly.
Yeah.
Too many of those.
So what do you do with that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's the negative
Because
side.
you are still essentially
on
an icon for
LinkedIn,
them.
I try to accept contacts and kind of do the polite thing and make myself accessible to people. But yeah, I mean, there's too many people who are trying to sell you something, and
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of patience for it, to be quite honest.
So how, and nothing excites you in that direction at all?
None.
That's hard. I imagine that that's
It's not hard because you go back to your roots. I mean, this goes back to the earlier discussion, which is I didn't grow up wanting to be an investor or a banker or wanting to be a rich man or whatever.
But what about the philosophy that once you do something too many times, you essentially change?
Yeah, so there's a weaning out period, if that's what you mean. But I've been through that, kind of the short-term withdrawal symptoms. Yes.
Okay, then you must be having the urge to get back, but now it's cool.
Yeah.
I understand, sir. What do you think about
Yeah, I think it's fair that, after I left SoftBank, if someone had come along maybe in the first few months, maybe I would have I thought about it seriously, but I'm way beyond that stage. Yeah.
And now you're writing a piece of fiction, sir.
Yes.
How long is it gonna take for you to come out with it if you have a timeline? Do you
Yeah.
make timelines with things like these?
I probably should.
Huh?
I probably should. I haven't actually committed. I'm just doing this on spec. I haven't actually. It's not as if I've shared it with my agent or we've gone out to publishers and I have a contract with a deadline. Maybe I should do that.
We do as musicians. We have to be like,
Yeah.
this is when because the song can take forever.
Yeah.
But
maybe I should. But I think this is going to be at a minimum a year, probably longer, probably 2 years.
And with that, sir, the dude abides. It was so lovely talking to you. You're
Thank
so
you.
congenial, so nice.
Thank you for reaching out.
It's
Enjoyed the
a
conversation.
beautiful book, guys. Of course, you should pick it up. Money Trap is just extraordinary in every sense. Could be a little complicated for you if you're a new reader, but it's going to be very rewarding. Cheers to you. And thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.